Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Hite Namani.
I met Prabhupada indirectly first. Before I was a devotee, I went searching for gurus, but I was disappointed. And I gave up my search for gurus, and I went off to join the Back to the Earth movement. I bought back to this is going to happen a couple of times while we're talking, because I forget things. Mother Earth, I bought Mother Earth magazine, and I started corresponding with people in the back of the magazine. And one of the people, I started sharing my search for a guru and how I got disappointed. And he was in Gainesville at the time. And he said, well, I've found a real guru. And you know, he's wonderful. You should come right away and meet this person. He's not like the others. So then I started corresponding back and forth. Well, you know, I've seen some pretty bad things, you know, like does he go on a waterbed with his young lady disciples and eat chocolate bars and soda pop? You know, and then he'd write me back, no, this person is very grave and he's doesn't have any sex connection with his young disciples. He doesn't sleep on a waterbed. You know, when he was in India, he didn't even have a bed. You know, he would write me back different things, and then I'd write, well, does he smoke marijuana and have his disciples smoke marijuana? And he'd write me back, no. He follows the 4 regulative principles and he teaches his disciples to. So we went back and forth like this. Each thing that I'd experienced, I'd say, so does he do this? No. You know, so actually Prabhupada was only in Gainesville for a few days. So by the time I was going back and forth, he'd already gone, but the boy didn't tell me that. He just kept saying, you have to come, you have to come. So finally I did. I literally gave up everything, gave away my car, gave all my things away. I had a little backpack on my back and I hitchhiked from New England down to Gainesville. And of course, by the time I got there, Prabhupada wasn't there anymore. And when I got to this man's address, the landlady answers the door. Who do you want? You know, I told her who I was looking for. Oh, I threw him out 2 weeks ago. He's a no good, he ain't paid me rent for 6 months, I threw him out. I'm like, well, I was supposed to visit him. You know, I came all the way from New England to visit him. Well, I know where he is. And she takes me by the hand out to the street and points up. See that at the end of the street there? Them's the Hare Krishnas. That's where he went. They'd take anybody. So I showed up at the temple. And when later in the conversations there, they asked, well, how did you find us? So I told them the name of the young man who'd been writing to me, and they all laughed. Oh yeah, he does this all the time. He's not really very serious about our movement, but he entices people to get interested, and they show up, and he never stays. So it was Prabhupada's qualities that he was talking to me about. Then Amarendra Prabhu was in charge of the temple at the time, and he gave us 4 classes every day, one of which was teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So one day we were reading from teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and I opened this chapter called The Devotee, and in the first or second paragraph, all the things that he'd been writing to me were listed exactly like he'd been doing it. And I said to Amarendra, well, that's not fair. This guy just copied stuff out of the book. And Amarendra just looked at me gravely and said, why do you care where this information came from, if it's true? And then when I met Prabhupada later, and became serious as a devotee, I saw, yes, it's true. All these qualities are Prabhupada. So some people came by getting a book, some by getting prasadam, and I came by hearing Prabhupada's qualities, not even by a sincere, devoted, committed follower, but by just someone that was impressed by Prabhupada.
Well, I joined the ISKCON temple in Brooklyn, New York in 1972, October Govardhan Puja. And it wasn't until probably the spring of 1973 that I personally met Srila Prabhupada. I had been with another yoga organization before that, the Integral Yoga Institute, Swami Satchidananda, and we had gone to the temple sometimes and scraped up prasadam from the table and like that. And one time we came and devotees were just mad with ecstasy and flowers were all over the road, so I think I missed Srila Prabhupada at the end of maybe 71 by seconds, but you could feel the ecstasy. So after joining in 72, I was obviously coming from a yoga background, really looking to meet Srila Prabhupada because I wanted to see what kind of aura he had. This was the typical New Age yoga that was going on. So when Prabhupada came out of the back room, Bali Mardan, Shruti Kirti, a number of other devotees, Parikshit's wife was there with her child, and I have that photo. And Prabhupada was walking from the back room, coming through the hallway, and all of us immediately dove and paid obeisances. And I said, I have to see what his aura is. Everybody else was still within paying obeisances, and I popped up. And I looked at Prabhupada, and Prabhupada looked at me. And the amount of light that I saw was amazing, like the sun. And Prabhupada looked at me and smiled. And I immediately bent down again, kneeled down again, and I said, he is my guru. Up until that, I was still visualizing a lot through Mayavadi eyes. When I first went to the temple, before I joined, I received a Bhagavad Gita when I went to the temple. And there's a whole story in front of that, but basically, it was Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, the original Macmillan, as it is, Bhagavad Gita. I had read so many Bhagavad Gitas. And when I read that, I read it from 4 in the evening till 4 in the morning, and I put it down and I said, he knows God. All the other Gitas I had read were allegories and analogies and poetic, and this really, really brought it home, that here was someone who finally I could have full faith in, that knew God. It just, Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita was the biggest solidifying things. Other things that occurred before that, receiving a poster and incense in Jamaica, you know, Lord in the Heart Vishnu, with a small piece of paper that came out when I opened it up that said Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam, and in English. And I was living up in the mountains of Jamaica doing yoga and was just automatically, I mean, Prabhupada came to me before I met him. First from the Gita, and before that through a poster. It was like little things of Prabhupada's presence coming to me. And reading his Bhagavad Gita totally solidified it, and then seeing him, it was finished. 42 years ago, you know?
I was raised Catholic and went to a Catholic grade school and high school. It was Our Lady of Lourdes. And so as a young girl, I would always go into the grotto and I would pray for Mary to appear to me. And I would always, you know, want that personal relationship of meeting a saint, or, you know, I didn't know the term pure devotee, but that was my desire. I'd make flower garlands out of dandelions and put them on her. I'd sneak in and put them on her, and I would pray fervently for years and years. Of course, when I hit my teenage years, that kind of went to the wayside, but, you know, I always had that desire deep down. So after I met the devotees and they told me about Prabhupada, I was thinking, I have to meet him. I was in Ohio, and they said the headquarters is in Los Angeles. So I thought, I got to get out there. So my parents were totally dismayed that I was not going to go to college, that I was going to take a little road trip, go out to California, and be back in a few months. So when I went out to LA, they said that Prabhupada was in San Francisco for the Rath Yatra. So I hitchhiked up with one lady devotee that I met. And of course, now that sounds horrible. It was horrible back then, but I didn't realize it. And so somehow or other we made it up there, and the temple was in San Francisco. It was a mortuary. So Prabhupada was coming in the morning. We came in the evening, and we stayed with all the ladies. And so the next morning, the ladies went up on the banister, and everyone had flowers in their hands. And so I was anticipating, finally Mary's coming through. I get to meet, a living spiritual person, and I was so excited. I really didn't know what to expect. It was kind of like meeting also like a rock star, because you read about him, you hear his music, you hear them speak, and now you're finally going to see him. So I was totally ramped up. So I was on the balcony, and tumultuous kirtan. As Prabhupada got closer, the kirtan became more and more fired up. And so then a big group of sannyasis walked in, and I didn't realize that Prabhupada was in the middle because Prabhupada was very small. And of course, just reading about him, you don't realize, you think he's 10 feet tall. So I was trying to see Prabhupada. And then the sannyasis parted a little bit, and there he was, that vision of that profile of Prabhupada. I had such a great view, I was a little bit above. So then what happened is all the ladies start not tossing gentle flower petals, but they were taking whole carnations and like belting them at Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was just, he was like getting hit. But I was seeing that Prabhupada was not at all agitated. That he had, he wasn't looking for respect for himself, that he was an ambassador for Krishna. And so he was totally grave. Any of us, someone knocks into us, steps on our foot, immediately, we want to retaliate or look at them or give them the evil eye. But Prabhupada was so transcendental. He had a mission, and he just glided on into the temple room, and that really amazed me.
When I had arrived in Vrindavan in those days, early 70s, Prabhupada was very accessible. Brahmananda would be at the front desk writing, and you'd walk in, he'd say, "Okay, Shrav, just go." And I'd walk in, and Prabhupada was walking around. I had a newspaper where Tirtha Maharaj, Prabhupada's godbrother that he had mentioned numerous times, had passed away, had left. And it was very interesting in the newspaper article where it said that he had entered into nirvana and had a picture of a aura around his head. So I had this newspaper with me, and I think I was probably fault-finding in some kind of way, that when I brought it up and started to begin describing it, Prabhupada abruptly, in such a powerful way, to stop me from going any further, said, "There is never any loss or diminution for any devotional service performed." And that always stuck with me, of trying to avoid too much fault-finding. And I use the word too much because it's such a tendency and nature of the mind. So it was such an instructional moment. At first I felt a little hurt that I may have offended Srila Prabhupada, but then I understood when Prabhupada was doing this with us, how much he was doing it to instruct us. Now we hear it all the time, but when he personally tells you that, it goes right to your heart. So that was a very powerful instruction to me at that time. And then I apologized to Srila Prabhupada, and he said, "No, that is all right." He always would do that. "No, that is all right." And then you get on the ground and just feel like an ant, a microbe, and pay full of obeisances, and Prabhupada, you look up and he's smiling. So that was a very dynamic experience.
Because Gayatri had impressed upon me that service to Srila Prabhupada was more important than seeing him, and I elected to help her in the kitchen pretty much the whole time during that festival. I missed all the amazing events up on the hill with the lectures and the kirtans, and I'm eternally grateful to you for providing those to me now that I can participate and hear the realizations of the disciples that were there. I chose to stay in the kitchen, and one thing that I was asked to do was help her make Prabhupada's birthday cake. So the part that I made or helped to make was a banana cake, peeling the bananas and helping her mix the cake in a huge garbage can with a big paddle, and helping her in different ways to bake it and put it together and do all the different parts. And when we were finished with everything, and it was our chance to take the cake up to Prabhupada, we sat somewhere in back of Prabhupada's Vyasa with this cake down low, and we were cutting the cake, and some disciple, maybe it was his servant or someone who was taking care of Srila Prabhupada, came with a plate and said to me, give a piece for Srila Prabhupada. And I took a nice big corner piece, maybe like a big 8-inch piece, and put it on the plate. And I swear, the second I put this on the plate and the man turned around to take it to Prabhupada, the devotees literally, it was like a tsunami of devotees. And I was crushed underneath the devotees grabbing for cake. My face was down in the cake, and I was running out of breath actually, and thinking, I'm going to die here, but this is great. I'm going to die in Prabhupada's birthday cake. I couldn't breathe. Finally, like, all the cake is pretty much gone, and I'm, get up. And since that day, I've heard so many renditions of this story, and I love hearing people talk about their viewpoint of the story. You know, like one person grabbed a piece and ran, and he was chased by everyone, and they all fell down, and the cake was just in pieces all over the grass. Other people were pushing it in each other's mouth, you know, and they were saying like, yes, that chocolate cake was, or whatever, and I would say to them, chocolate? It was banana, you know, and every person I talked to said the cake was a different flavor. So it seemed to me like this cake became a Kalpavriksha cake touched by Prabhupada, and immediately it was whatever the favorite flavor that you had was in that cake. It was like his wonderful gift to everybody, and they fought over it like anything.
I was the president of Madras in 76, end of 75, 76. Along with Bhava Budi, we actually became co-presidents. Sravanananda had asked us to be presidents there. And we organized a 10-day program for Srila Prabhupada to come, front page articles in the Hindu newspaper, and we had tens of thousands of people coming. And when Srila Prabhupada arrived with a number of our God brothers, entourage, off the airplane, coming in the door to the waiting area, Tamal, Krsna Maharaj, and Harikesh, and Hari Sori, etc., etc. We were all there gathered. The devotees who weren't flying in had come by land, many other older God brothers, Guru Kripa, and we were beginning to have a raging kirtan as Srila Prabhupada came off the stairs of the plane onto the tarmac, and all the people in the airport were starting to gather. We had many life members and guests who had piles of garlands in their hands. And as Srila Prabhupada opened the door, and the kirtan was raging, and conch shells were blowing, and he began to walk inside the door 10, 15 feet, he stopped. And at that point, as the kirtan is raging, people began putting garlands over his head. Problem was, people were so excited to put garlands over his head that his face began to disappear. So we had to immediately get someone to remove as they put and remove as they put to keep the garlands just by his chin, because it was starting to come up higher. And all of that combined, and everybody being in ecstasy, Srila Prabhupada just smiled, and this wave of ecstasy flowed through that room, and everybody was looking at each other. I mean, people were literally leaping 10 feet in the air. But everybody looked at each other like, did you feel that? Because everybody felt that power. It probably just stopped and just, again, lit up with that wonderful smile of ecstasy that we saw so many times. So it was a wonderful arrival of Srila Prabhupada. The experience was amazing. We had a nice facility for Srila Prabhupada to stay with a life member. We were going to head to Nellore to do the temple that Mahamsa tried to arrange after the program. But Prabhupada was there for 10 days every night. We had a Gujarati man who spoke 14 languages. It would translate into Tamil. The governor was there of Tamil Nadu, but he was actually Gujarati. And every night was an ecstatic program. You can hear actually the audio in 76 where it says Madras, and then after that is Nellore. And they're just wonderful, wonderful lectures, wonderful questions from the people of South India. And one night when Prabhupada, we had a small house in Madras, in Kilpak, but Prabhupada would always come for lunch prashad at the temple. It's like a temple house, but he would stay at the life members at night. So one day he came and they said, so Sravanananda, are you going to cook for Prabhupada? I said, well, I've never cooked for Prabhupada before, so I'm nervous. So Harikesh said, I'll cook. So we made a little sitting area for Srila Prabhupada and a choki and a tully. And Harikesh was cooking in the back, and we had drumstick trees that Prabhupada loved drumsticks, whether it was in Vrindavan. I don't know if you're familiar with drumsticks. It's very popular in sambar and South Indian cooking, but Prabhupada would go to Vrindavan and come back with a bundle of drumsticks. And with the trees, he said, make sure you make drumsticks. He said, drumsticks are very good for the heart. And Harikesh was cooking, and I was serving Prabhupada on his plate, trying to do it all right, and I brought a chapati. Prabhupada touched it like this. And he looked at me and said, chapati means hot. So I ran back to Harikesh and said, Prabhupada's saying chapati means hot. He says, okay, I'll cook the chapati and you run. And it's marble, the floors, literally sliding to give it to Srila Prabhupada. I would say it's only 20 feet, 25 feet, 30 feet at the most. And I would slide it and try to put it on Prabhupada's plate quickly. Prabhupada would tap the chapati. He would say, chapati means hot. So then I ran back to Harikesh. I said, Prabhupada is not eating the chapatis. He said, chapati means hot. So he puffed up a chapati like a puri. I ran and slid to Prabhupada, put it on his plate. He poked the chapati that was puffed up. Steam came out. Prabhupada said, that is chapati. So in instructional, I've always remembered that. I hate a flat chapati. I love it when you get a hot chapati and you touch it and the steam comes out. Always remembering what Prabhupada had taught me. So then we had a wonderful program, and we were driving one day in a Mercedes with me and Hari Sori in the front seat, and Prabhupada, Harikesh, and Tamal in the back. Now I'm trying to keep getting a little glimpse and look back at Srila Prabhupada, just to have darshan. And I'm looking, and I'm seeing Tamal. He's like a little bit sleepy. And I turn around, and Tamal has got his head on Prabhupada's shoulder, snoring. And I turned around to Prabhupada quickly, and Prabhupada's love and compassion, like it was his child, was like, don't wake him, don't wake him. And at that moment, I saw another aspect of Srila Prabhupada that was just so amazing. His love, his kindness, his compassion. I mean, we're lowly disciples. He's a Shaktivesh avatar, wonderful, divine, pure devotee, and how much love he had. And seeing those things, sometimes you don't see it unless it's in real life or in videos. Prabhupada had those qualities that were always so compassionate, so amazing. So Hari Sori and I were kind of laughing about it, and Prabhupada was like, just, let him sleep, let him sleep. Very kind.
Prabhupada was coming. He had left Los Angeles in the summer of '75. At that time, I was already initiated, I believe, first initiation. So Prabhupada was coming. He pulls up, and all the big guns were with him, Brahmananda and Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Jayatirtha. And so we were on the roof of the house, and all the ladies had flower petals, and I felt like we were like the queens of Dwarka, that Prabhupada was coming, and the flower petals were going to come down from the heavenly planets. So Prabhupada pulls up, everyone was excited, chanting. So like in many places, we just found out, just recently that Prabhupada was coming, everyone was painting, cleaning, getting everything ready. So the devotees had this great idea, what we thought was a great idea. And we painted the sidewalk, this beautiful lotus flower. And then the steps that were leading up to the house, we painted the Hare Krishna mantra on the steps. So there was about 5 or 6 steps, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And because we were infants practically still at that time, we thought, wow, Prabhupada will really like this. He'll really show how Krishna conscious we are. Well, it certainly did show how Krishna conscious we weren't. So when Prabhupada gets out, big kirtan, he goes to walk up the steps and he sees, that the Hare Krishna mantra is there. So I'm up on top, I have a good view, and I was seeing that Prabhupada was immediately disturbed, and he spoke to the next one, who spoke to the next one, and it stopped the Gunagraj Maharaj because he was the president, and he had to take responsibility. But then Prabhupada, of course, refused to walk up on the steps because the Hare Krishna mantra, he had taught us that Krishna and his name were non-different. So to walk on Krishna's name was such an offense. So Prabhupada walked around and went up the grass, up the embankment, and went around to the other side of the temple, just to show us that, what an offense this was. So needless to say, very soon afterwards, the devotees were out there painting that over. So that was a good lesson for all of us.
So when Srila Prabhupada was going to go to Nellore from Madras after this wonderful program, we had it in a big wedding hall, and we were going to go by train. So we decided to hire what's called in North India or Bengal, a Shehnai group. Shehnai with the little trumpet, saxophone, flute type, clarinets, and drums. In South, it's even more traditional with big drums and big trumpets and big... So we organized one to guide Prabhupada down the train station platform to his coach, which was all prepared for him with white sheets and flowers, and devotees were sitting that were always with him and a servant in that coach. And Prabhupada just loved. He loved Nageshwaram like he liked Shehnai. We got to the train and we went to Nellore, which is in Andhra Pradesh, and we had been donated a piece of land that was going to be having a temple built. And we did the installation of Ananta Shesh. Mahamsa had arranged the land. And we found out later, we were starting to get some kind of little tidbits of information that things weren't quite right. We actually found out that they were putting in the clause in the contract and the land donation that if it's not built within a certain period of time, they're going to take the land back. So you could literally have completed 90% of the building. And so Prabhupada said, that's ridiculous. Take the Ananta Shesh back, we're going. But up until that point, these people from Andhra Pradesh were non-veg. And they were cooking vegetarian for us, but we started noticing like things in the yogurt, forget the yogurt preparation that you eat has sometimes tomatoes, cucumbers, it also had some onions in it. Devotees mentioned it to Prabhupada. He said, we are their guest, ignore for now. So another point of just Prabhupada's tolerance, looking at the big picture. So we went on a morning walk before leaving Nellore, and Mr. Trivedi, who was a lawyer, actually a lawyer for Chinmayananda, and a good friend of ours in translating, came with us on the morning walk. Now he had told us at the Gaudiya Math in Madras, they like to talk badly about our organization. And, we heard some of the things he told us, but he told us that to let us be informed what was going on and try to avoid them too. But he had told me that they actually had said that if Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to spread the holy name in every town and village, he would have done it himself. So we're on the morning walk in Nellore, and Mr. Trivedi's with me, and you'll hear him in the tapes. He'll be asking questions, and Prabhupada's answering him, and I'm standing next to him, and I'm saying, bring up that thing about what they said at the Gaudiya Math. Prabhupada turns around and said, why you were talking while I'm talking? You'll hear that in the tape. It just says devotee in the tape, but Ekanath corrected it in the archives. And Prabhupada was obviously getting interested in what was being said there. And when Mr. Trivedi said to Prabhupada that how the Gaudiya Math had said that if they wanted to spread it in every town and village, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would have done it himself. Prabhupada raised his cane and said, he has left the credit for me. And all the devotees just went, Jai, Hari Bol, Srila Prabhupada, with a big smile on his face. And I always thought about that for years, that if anybody were to ever say that in the material world, you'd think they have an ego. But you could see Prabhupada was egoless. He said it in an ecstatic way as a servant of Lord Chaitanya. And it's a very, very powerful thing that it's... So I'm happy that Prabhupada chastised me for talking while he was talking, but I'm happy I also brought that up because it was just an amazing experience to hear that, very powerful statement.
I was determined to get some personal service for Srila Prabhupada, and somehow or other in Dallas I was given some clothes of Srila Prabhupada's to iron. And it was very late at night that I was doing it, and I had to wash and iron many different sets of other clothes first for devotees who were participating there at the temple while so many devotees came to visit Prabhupada in Dallas. And it was very late at night, and every time I went back and forth from the laundry area to go to my classroom where I was ironing, I would take a little detour, go out in the parking lot and look up at Prabhupada's window. I don't know what I was thinking, But there he was, the light on, and it kind of just pacified me. Yes, there's Prabhupada. He's up in the room. He's probably translating or whatever late at night. And by the time I finished the last one, it must have been very late, like almost midnight, or maybe it was even later than that. And I went out again, and this time I had a big load, and the door slammed. So when I got out in the parking lot and I looked up, Prabhupada's face was there in the window, and at first I was like a little startled, and I realized, oh my God, I slammed the door and it probably disturbed him. But his look wasn't like, who's disturbing me? His look was as if he was like the chowkidar. It's like someone's there at the door. And he was looking to see, who is this? Like he was the guard of who is here? And then he saw it was me, and immediately he saw my arms are full of these laundries, and he immediately folded his palms and lowered his head, and I was like shocked. And I froze at first. Then I realized, oh my God, I've got to pay obeisances. It's Prabhupada. I got down, paid my obeisances, and of course, by the time I got up, he had left the window and gone back to his work. But for him to recognize my little insignificant self like that, it meant so much to me. Here he is receiving my service personally. He was thankful, the tiniest little person who did any little thing in his mission, and he wanted us to know that.
One other thing, when Prabhupada was staying at the Life Members' Home in Madras, he was talking with all of us and the Life Members and having a nice conversation, and devotee brought up at the Parthasarathi Temple in downtown Madras, which we did programs at. They're very nice people there. It's Parthasarathi. So they had a mustache on Krishna. So devotees brought this up to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, Krishna does not have mustache. He said, Krishna has like peach fuzz of a young man just going through adolescence. And he said, Nava Yovanam, eternally youthful. He said, there is no mustache on Krishna. So it was very nice that Prabhupada took his finger to his lip as though he was, he used the word peach fuzz too, like little light hairs. Prabhupada was explaining Krishna has no mustache because he's Nava Yovanam. So that was a really nice experience too. And then one time in Vrindavan, we would go every morning in the early days when it was just huts and the Vrindavan temple was being built. Just go out with Prabhupada every morning, and there was no construction anywhere except, sand and some little bit of cement and steel coming up. So all the roads were just agriculture, and we would take a mat and Prabhupada would sit on the side of the road and call over Mayavadis and chastise them, speak in Hindi with them for a while, and then get into a debate with them, a heated debate. They were always respectful and they would leave, and Prabhupada, but he was showing us the fierceness of challenging the Mayavadi philosophy. And I once asked him, Srila Prabhupada, people are so stuck in darkness. How do you tell a person who's blind, that there's vision, that there's light when they've never experienced it? And Prabhupada said, prasadam. He said, prasadam is the most important thing to bring people out of darkness. So that was also a very major thing I've always remembered, because I know that you had mentioned earlier about how I was first influenced. That's how I pretty much moved in the temple. That was like the last, straw, nice straw, that didn't break the camel's back, but broke my attachment to anything. And to move in was the prasadam. It was Govardhan Puja. And mountains of prasadam. And basically slept on the prasadam floor that night, just keeled over. So Prabhupada's program of prasadam, you don't find this in any other yoga group. I had eaten so many, Sri Chimoy, this one, that one, whoever you're going to mention, and everything was very, very spicy, but there was nothing like the cooking that we had in those early days in the temples. The prasadam was just amazing, and the devotees had so much love and devotion, and it was opulent. And that was another big thing to make us join in those days. Most devotees I've spoken with. And Prabhupada reiterated it there right on the side of the road in Vrindavan, how important it was.
I was able to go to India in 1977. And that was, of course, the last year that Prabhupada was with us. So when we got to Mayapur, the ladies were given the rooftop of the kitchen. Now, the rooftop is exactly the rooftop. It had no plastic over it. It had no shelter at all. So we all got up there, and within a couple hours, a huge storm came. It was blowing everything away, and we were totally unprepared, and everyone got really sick. And so some of the girls I was with from San Diego became really delirious. Everyone was really sick, and there was no facility. The bathrooms the latrines were stopped up. It was a horrible flood. But Prabhupada was there, and he was giving the morning class. So the next morning, I don't know how I even made it to class. I crawled, really. It was quite a distance, but I had to see Prabhupada. So when I was in, and he gave the Bhagavatam class, it was the talking about Prahlad Maharaj. It was during the time of the deprogramming in America, and so Prabhupada was talking a lot about Prahlad and his demoniac parents and like that. So I was listening, but I was really holding my stomach, and I was bending over and catching some of it, but really in pain. So after the class, Prabhupada would circumambulate, with the Gurukula boys, and he would go around, and so the devotees were up dancing, but I was sitting down because I was so sick. I was a little dizzy, I was feverish, and I was watching Prabhupada. He was circumambulating, and he would ring the bell, and each time he'd go around, he'd ring it a little. The devotees the kirtan was getting more and more fired up. And then I was watching Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was looking over in my direction. Of course, I thought he was looking right at me. And then Prabhupada, with his hand, he just gave a very beautiful, very wonderful, graceful gesture of rising above. He was taking his hand, and so with that one gesture, he uplifted me off my suffering bodily concept condition, and I jumped up and started dancing. And I was realizing at that time that not only was he lifting me, but he was lifting the whole world. He was lifting the whole world with, simply a mere gesture, because behind that gesture was all the potency of the disciplic succession, the parampara, Sri Krishna himself and his spiritual master. And I was transformed. For that brief time, I was totally transformed to the spiritual world. And it was ecstatic. And then after 3 times around, Prabhupada, went up with his entourage, and again, I kind of crumpled down to the floor and somehow crawled back to my room. But that was an amazing experience that I'll never forget.
We were so violently sick at that Mayapur festival. I can't remember if it was 74 or 75, because I arrived in India December 73, so it might have been 74. And things in those days, they were using very, very bad oils, which we eventually got ghee from Holland, containers full that Prabhupada was very pleased about. And everybody was violently sick. I mean, literally everyone. And there's a portico type rail covered area on the outside of the first, I think, Lotus building, the guest house. So we were all laying there on mats and whatever we had. And we could barely pay obeisances to Prabhupada or turn over to even acknowledge it, but we tried our best. And Prabhupada was walking around and very disturbed that everyone was so sick, so he called a homeopathic doctor. And I remember the homeopathic doctor, he couldn't even put it in our hand and give us a glass of water, which in homeopathy, you just put it in your mouth and dissolve it. He personally put the pill in everyone's mouth, and Prabhupada was also walking around near him, around him, constantly seeing the devotees and observing. And within literally minutes after the pill went in our mouth, Prabhupada, whoever he was in the area, was very happy. And we woke up and out of a slumber of unconsciousness and a very bad disease to almost being fully conscious, like, what just happened? What just happened? And I never thought about it too much until decades later, where I really felt that Prabhupada was performing a miracle. He was present, he ordered the doctor to come there, and I don't believe to this day that one little white pill could have made us go from such a state of diseased consciousness and dysentery and whatever to be standing up and ready to do service again. There was like very little time frame in being so bad to so good. So many years later, I really felt that was a miracle that Prabhupada performed.
I had a large class of young children, 3, 4, 5 years old, roughly like 50 little kids. And they had acquired a small lot nearby the Dallas temple that they were using as a playground for the children. But there really wasn't anything there. But Prabhupada had told us to do cowherd pastimes with the kids to engage them, cowherd boy games and like this. So it was my idea to dress them up like cows and cowherd boys, and they liked it. So Prabhupada was visiting, and he also had a garden on the other side of the parking lot, and he was in the garden getting a massage, and I'm not sure whether I was aware of that or not, but it was playtime for the children, and I had dressed them all up. Most of them had these ears, like a cow ears, and a tail pinned on, and then there was Krishna and Balaram, and they were dressed perfectly like Krishna and Balaram with their flutes and all this. And the kids were expert at this. Krishna and Balaram would lead and play the flute, and then the cows would walk on all fours going moo, like this. So as we left the building out into the parking lot, headed towards the playground, the kids were all mooing, moo, moo. And Prabhupada obviously heard them because he came to the gate door and opened the door to look out. As soon as he saw the kids, he smiled, like just, his smile was oceanic. And he watched the whole scene, and I didn't know what to do. And maybe it was foolish of me, I don't know, but I just called out, "It's Prabhupada, pay obeisances." And the children turned around and saw Prabhupada, and Krishna and Balaram did not pay obeisances. They stood and posed like Krishna and Balaram, and the cows turned around and went moo, like this. They all paid obeisances. And then they got up and started, continuing on like this, and Krishna and Balaram regally turned around and started leading the cows off, and Prabhupada ran towards the last cow and started pulling the little tail on the cow, and the little child was totally playing with Prabhupada, moo, 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 like this, trying to get away from Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was having such fun pulling the tail while the kids, moo, moo, like this. And then, you know, the children walked away, like playing their parts exactly. Prabhupada went back to his garden, and it was immediately as if I felt like we were all transported at that second. Immediately, Prabhupada interacting with them, we were in Vrindavan. Without a doubt, we were all there. It was Vrindavan. Prabhupada could bring you immediately to Vrindavan just by being with him.
Whenever Prabhupada would come to Mayapur, drive down Bhaktisiddhanta Road, we would greet him quite far down the road, and the car would slow down, and we'd have a raging kirtan and bring Prabhupada, not bring Prabhupada, but follow and be in front of the car and on the side of the car while Prabhupada was in the car, bringing him to the entrance of Mayapur building. And at this Mayapur festival, Prabhupada walked in, and before he did anything, he just walked in and sat on the Vyasasan. Prabhupada sat on the Vyasasan and became very grave. Now, devotees that were there, and I know Hamsaduta would remember this because that'll come and segue into that part of the story. All of a sudden, things were very bright outside, and I don't think we had electricity. So the light in the temple room appeared to be disappearing and dissipating, almost like a cloud covering the sun. And everybody became very, very sober, and instead of singing Jaya Radha Madhava or leading into giving a lecture, Prabhupada just started talking. In this very kind of different lightness within the temple, Prabhupada's color seemed to change. And Prabhupada said that in your previous life you were all associates of Lord Chaitanya. And he said, somehow or another, I have been designated or assigned as the captain of this ship. But you have actually done everything to spread this Krishna consciousness. And then Prabhupada went into ecstasy. He just sat there, went into ecstasy, and the whole room was frozen in time. And everybody was feeling it because everybody was looking to the side, to the other devotee next to them, like, are you feeling this? Could barely talk. And Prabhupada wasn't speaking for a long time. And I don't think anybody wanted this experience to stop. And all of a sudden, off to the right side of the temple room, I remember Hamsaduta picking up the mridanga and starting to chant Hare Krishna, which seemed to break like the almost samadhi-like ecstatic mood. And I know my experience at that was anger towards Hamsaduta for breaking this ecstatic wave that we were all in that boat with our captain together. So that was over, but I heard later that devotees went to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, when this happens to you, is this what we should do? Hamsaduta was there and some other devotees were there. And I heard, this is secondhand, that Prabhupada said, yes, that's okay, but it doesn't happen so often, does it? So that was, I mean, I can't grade every different experience, but I'd say this is one of the most directly ecstatic, powerful experiences that I had felt. There was definitely color change in Prabhupada's face. The room had become dark, and nobody said a word. I don't know if it was eternity or minutes, but it felt like eternity until Hamsaduta broke it with a kirtan.
I was doing some service. In those days, they didn't have all the hired help, so they really depended on the devotees to cut vegetables, to help clean, all these things, which was nectar because we know that devotional service is, Prabhupada gave that to us to help us control the mind, purify us. So I was in the deity room cleaning up. Everyone was gone, and I was doing the dishes. It was pretty simple. It was just a stove on the floor and some little countertops and things like that, but I was cleaning. And all of a sudden, Palika comes running in, and she said, Prabhupada wants to eat. He hasn't eaten in days. as we know, in that time in 1977, it was kind of the beginning of Prabhupada's difficult health period. So she said, "Please help me." And so I was like, "Help you? Will I help you? This is an amazing opportunity." So I remember she said he wants some apple juice. So I thought, well, where's the champion juicer? So she said, "No, you take a grater and you grate up an apple and then you put it in a cheesecloth and squeeze it." So I did that. I cut up some eggplant and things, and she was expert. So very quickly she made a nice meal and brought it up to Prabhupada. So I was done by that time. I was cleaned up afterwards and I was done, but I thought, here is my golden opportunity. There's nobody around. She's going to come down with that big maha plate of Prabhupada, and I'm going to be able to get the whole thing. So I was, kind of dusting around, kind of waiting for her to come. So then she came down with a plate, beautiful plate, marble and everything. And so I was standing there. I said, "Oh, I'll help you transfer the plates." And she understood my mind, and she said, "Yes, you can do that." She said, "But Prabhupada just said that while he's sick like this, that no one should take his remnants." So she saw the horrified look on my face and gave me a little mercy, and she said, "Okay, tilt your head back." And she took his juice that I actually had made him, and it was halfway gone. And then she just poured it from that beautiful marble cup into my mouth. So even though I was disappointed on one hand that I couldn't enjoy more of the maha, I was really appreciating how Prabhupada, in his bad health, the year of his death, just several more months and he would be leaving us, he was still concerned about his disciples and for the devotees not to take his remnants in case there was any kind of disease or anything like that. Of course, that's in his humility. Devotees would have lapped it up in a second, but Prabhupada was always so caring about the devotees, and it wasn't just when he was feeling good, because that's easy to do, but when you're in a difficult situation like that, to care about others. It really showed his magnanimous outlook and his personality and his caring, and that he really, really, truly loved the devotees, and it came out in so many ways. And so I really got to experience that firsthand.
I was working with Tejas Das in Delhi in the early days. That would have been around early '74. I had first arrived in Vrindavan, and Tejas really wanted my help and for collecting and building the Vrindavan temples, so I went there. And some 6, 9 months, 10 months later, Sravanananda had come through and said, "Sravanananda, I really need a president in Madras. Would you mind?" I said, "Okay." I spoke to Tejas. So Prabhupada was there at the temple, and I was heading to Vrindavan first. I wanted to go to Vrindavan and have darshan before I went down south. And Prabhupada was actually down below this little stairway and circumambulating Tulsi and chanting japa. He had his little Prabhupada hat on. It was winter, so it was probably possibly late '74. And I didn't know Prabhupada was there, and I'm like kind of escaping to go down to South India and go to Vrindavan first, and I just got down and paid obeisances to Prabhupada. And he said, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "Uh-oh." And I said, "Srila Prabhupada, I'm going to Vrindavan before I go down to Hyderabad." And Prabhupada said, "Oh, then you can come with us. We're going also." And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to squeeze into the car, and Tejas is going to give me a little bit of chastisement, and anybody else, like, "Why are you coming, Shrav? There's no room." I said, "Srila Prabhupada, no, that's okay. I'll just take the train." He says, "No, we'll make room." I said, no, it'll be too tight, Srila Prabhupada says, "Then we'll squeeze you in." And I'm like debating with Srila Prabhupada that I, can't go in the same car with him, but I know possible repercussions as a new brahmachari. So I said, no, that's okay. So Prabhupada kind of at one point said, "All right then." He said, "Then please, when you arrive, you'll probably arrive before us. Tell Guru Das to arrange my bed on the roof." Because in those days we had very little electricity, no fans, no air conditioning, so we slept on the roof to try to get some breeze. So I arrived in Vrindavan. I immediately told Guru Das, I said, "This is what Srila Prabhupada told me." He said, "Okay, we'll make the bed on the roof." And then after that, Prabhupada arrived. So I was there to greet him at the car. Well, two things really stood out to me. One was, this was the early days where various people were starting to get very fancy suitcases, like Halliburton and Hartman and like that. And Prabhupada got out of the car, and first thing he said, "So you made arrangements?" I said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada." His little suitcase was, you know, in probably real dollars in those days, $5 or $10, with a rope tied around it. I mean, like something you would have gotten Woolworths, which most people don't even know that, you know? And I just said, oh my God, this is such a symptom of such a pure devotee. You know, you see so many other things in life, but here is my guru again showing us simplicity and true minimalism and humility. So it was just another excitement to see again the purity of my guru. Another instructional lesson about the importance of reality and being a Vaishnav.
In my large class of small devotees, who, by the way, brought me up in Krishna consciousness, I'd only been in the movement like 8 months or 9 months when I was told to go to Dallas, and all of them were born in the movement. They'd been there 5 years. They're the ones that cultivated me, practically speaking. And all the children were taught to chant Bhagavad Gita slokas. They were chanting the verses and would hear the meaning, but Prabhupada said the young children didn't have to understand the purport completely, but he wanted them to get some idea. So I drew the cards, like large cards with a picture that would give them something to remember about that verse. And that's how we would do it. I'd hold the card and they'd chant the verse, and the next one, then the next verse, and then like this by picture. And then Prabhupada wanted us to bring the children into the temple room on Sunday and have them all together chant all the Bhagavad Gita, the whole 18 chapters. And I was thinking, whoa, you know, this is really going to be a lot for 3- and 4-year-old kids to do. And I was thinking, you know, like, do we have to? But Prabhupada mentioned that one of the important reasons why he wanted the children to memorize these verses and be able to rattle them off chapter after chapter after chapter, he said that these verses and this recitation is impressed forever on the subtle body. And if these children don't make it in this lifetime, it goes with them to their next birth. They will have the entire Bhagavad Gita already there with them to help them. So that was enough for me. It pacified me. And not only did we do it in class with cards, but on our way to the playground, you can imagine I've got 50 kids. How am I going to tie 50 shoes and keep all these kids sitting down and engaged, right? Again, the verses, the slokas, while we tie the shoes, you know, me and the assistant would tie all the shoes and we'd do a chapter. While we're at the laundromat, you know, so the kids didn't tear the whole place up and run out, and, you know, okay, let's all sit down and do chapter 6, you know, while we're changing the clothes. And this became it was my savior, this chanting of chapters, because the kids liked it, it kept them engaged, and I remembered that Prabhupada said it would go with them forever.
I had come back to America for collecting for Mayapur. When we were having the big Rath Yatra in New York, I don't remember the first really big one that we had there. Was it 75? But Jayananda was still there. Prabhupada was there. We had the West 55th building. I got a crew from Long Island. And I wanted to do it in 16 millimeter, which in those days was a bigger format. And they were professionals. They had an editing studio. It was a lot of editing, adding music. They were up in the windows of the buildings. I mean, they really took some great footage of the Rath Yatra Festival. It was just a random thing that I did. Nobody had told me to do it because I was going back to India. And in India, we had a briefcase projector. we'd pop it open and we could put it on a desk and people could watch movies right on the desk, or we could flip the lens and reflect it onto a large sheet like in the villages. So I wanted to show people the Rath Yatra. Just pure Rath Yatra, nothing else, and music and chanting. So we put this whole movie together, compiled it, put it in Fairchild cassettes. And when I arrived in Vrindavan, Adi Keshav was in New York when I filmed the movie. He said, Sravanananda, show it to Prabhupada. So I was in Madras actually at the time. You know, I was just in America collecting maybe from Madras or visiting family. So I popped open the Fairchild, many devotees were there, and I started showing the movie. And Prabhupada really liked it, so I was very happy I could please him. And first thing he said was, you know, they think we're CIA in Bengal. He said, how would they think we're CIA and put on a Rath Yatra in Manhattan? What CIA would put on a Rath Yatra in Manhattan? And he knew that I was, you know, in Madras. We had letters exchanged and we were going to build a temple there. We were having great response. And Prabhupada said like this, he said, would you mind going to Bengal and showing this in every town and village? I was totally entrenched in Madras. I never thought of it. When Prabhupada said that, I said, Srila Prabhupada, whatever you want. Prabhupada, he's so humble the way he asked that. It wasn't like, go to Bengal and, would you mind? You know? I said, no, Srila Prabhupada, not at all. And then devotees said, yeah, Baba Bhudi's there, he could cover. And that's when I went to Bengal and went village to village on buses, all over Bengal, from the Bay of Bengal to Darjeeling to Assam, to Guwahati. We showed the movie on screens. We had reporters who came and said about the movie. We were on the boat program, in the Nitai Pada Kamala, one of the earliest things, 3 months in the Ganges. And we were distributing Gitar Gans, the little Gitar Gan that was Prabhupada's wonderful little production. And I wrote a letter one time. We were thinking of meeting Srila Prabhupada in Kumbh Mela, but the devotees were so fired up that they just wanted to distribute lots of books. So I wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada and said we had just distributed that month 16,000 Gitar Gans. Prabhupada wrote a letter back so happy and said, that is very results. I'll always remember that that is very results. And we were very happy that we could please him and serve him in separation.
So one of the services I did in San Diego was for the deities, and it was soon to be Rath Yatra in San Francisco, and they're making new carts, and they needed new canopies, and so they put out a call for seamstresses, and somehow or other, Gunagrai Maharaj knew that, you know, I could sew and gave me the mercy to go up there to do that. So I went up about 5 days or so before the Rath Yatra. And I was sewing, sewing in the sewing room. So it was a few days before Prabhupada came, and so when Prabhupada came, there was, they called a press conference. As we know, when Prabhupada would come to places, they would try to get the media to come and things. So the press was there, and he invited all the devotees. There wasn't that many of us, so it was really intimate. So Prabhupada had just flown in from somewhere, I'm not sure where, and he was telling me that, or telling us that the pilot came on the plane, and he actually sat next to Prabhupada and said, you know, Your Grace, you know, do you mind if I ask you some questions? And so Prabhupada, you know, always the gracious host and always anxious to share Krishna consciousness. And the man was very thoughtful because he had a great question, and Prabhupada was relating this to us and also in the press conference. The man said, if God is good and all-loving and great, Prabhupada is, you know, agreeing, he said, then why did God create evil? And Prabhupada was telling us. So I told them that the sun is shining, very bright, it's beautiful, but if you turn your back on the sun, you create a shadow. It's not God, it's not the sun's fault. You created the shadow by turning your back. So similarly, when people turn their back on God, then evil is there. And then Prabhupada looked very innocently at us and he said, was that all right? Did I give a good answer? You know, and the devotees were just like clapping, and they said, oh, that was great, Prabhupada. And you could just see the very innocent, you know, boy-like enthusiasm and really deep humility that he was really saying, you know, was that all right? Did I give a good answer? And it was so cute and so endearing to me that he would really bring us in and share that with us. So that was really special.
Srila Prabhupada wasn't feeling well, and he actually had to be helped up onto the Vyasasan. He still came to give the class, and he needed a cup to spit the mucus in, so they brought him a paper cup. So he had one paper cup with water in it to rinse his mouth and a cup to spit the mucus in. And after the class, they had to actually help him off the Vyasasan. When he came out, they had to hold him while Shuddhakirti put his shoes on. But yet, as he came along the hallway, he looked in a classroom and wanted to go in. Now, during that class, I had all these little kids, and one of them had started crying. So I had taken her out and put her in my classroom, and she had just cried herself to sleep behind the door. So when Prabhupada opened that door to go in the classroom, it bumped into this child who immediately woke up and started crying all over again and backs up. But then as soon as Prabhupada enters and this child sees Prabhupada, she stops crying immediately, falls down, pays obeisances, and starts like this to Prabhupada. And I'm not sure why he had decided to go into the room or whether he sensed she was there or whatever, but his intention was completely focused on her. And he reached out and touched her head gently. And then his eyes moved over to me, and his glance pierced me with this message, you know, you've got to treat these children nicely, gently, kindly. I mean, like I'd been told we were supposed to be real strict until they're 16, right? But this look of Prabhupada was like admonishing me to the core. And from that day on, I changed completely and realized, you know, these are the future of our movement. They have to have positive impressions to go on with. And I became loving because I saw Prabhupada's love.
Okay, that's great. It's wonderful. In relation to that, where did that instruction come about that you had to be strict for till they were 16?
Prabhupada had told that. Yeah, Prabhupada.
In Dallas, he said something like that?
Yes, he gave many instructions when we were in Dallas about how to treat the
tell
children.
me about some of those.
Srila Prabhupada wanted the teachers to be strict. And he even said things like, you could keep a stick, but only show the stick. Don't ever use the stick, but you should be strict. And he said when, classically, that when the child is very young, the parents lavish attention. Then when they're 5, they're strictly managed till they're 16, then you have to befriend them. This was how to do it. So I had the stick in the corner of my classroom. I never used it, but I was very strict with the children until that incident. Not that I let up on discipline, but I realized that they needed more than just strictness. And they were away from their parents, who was hugging them, and you know. And one thing that I did as an outgrowth of this experience with Prabhupada, I realized that the parents never wrote their kids. And the children would have birthdays or whatever. And, you know, so I used to write the children cards and letters from their parents and have them mailed and, you know, pretend this came from There were a few parents, okay, that did right, but not everybody. So I wrote the birthday cards and things from the parents so that they would feel loved, because I realized that without that love, they weren't going to stay. Why was I staying? Was I staying because Prabhupada was strict? Follow the 4 regulative principles, get up every morning, take your cold shower. No, that's not why I stayed. I stayed because I knew Prabhupada loved me. He loved me. That's why I stayed.
Prabhupada's instructions in his books were extremely powerful, and his desire to save every living entity within the universe by the distribution of not only his books but paraphernalia, the spiritual sky incense to the poster. I mean, it was like Prabhupada was all pervasive as Chaitya Guru. Wherever you went, whether I was hiking across America and seeing devotees in Vancouver or Boulder, I mean, by Prabhupada's mercy, all he wanted to do was to save everyone in this world. And just so much contact with devotees and paraphernalia. And then finally Prabhupada, it just culminated in the massive nuclear explosion of his radiance and sun, and seeing him for the first time in Brooklyn. Now, I was sitting with what is now the head of the Integral Yoga Institute, and he was my friend. And we were sitting in a car, and he had long hair and a beard, and I still had very short hair like now. And I was with that yoga group, and we were opening up a black and white Back to Godhead. Again, another mercy of Srila Prabhupada. And he was opening up this magazine, and I said to him, "Do you think you could ever become a Hare Krishna?" He said, "Yeah." And I said, "I don't think I could." So he's the head of the Integral Yoga Institute now, and I actually became a devotee. So Prabhupada's mercy is so powerful. His mercy was so powerful that no matter how hard I try to get away, he's always there and pulling us in. It was an old black and white Back to Godhead, and just kind of freaked me out. But then I saw a devotee on a train in New York, smelling of incense, beautiful, attractive cloth, kirtan on the train, giving out books. Prabhupada's influence was truly all-pervasive. But he was always gracious. When he was a guest at someone's house, he wasn't a king. He was always a servant. He was always there to serve even his own disciples. All the other gurus, the relationship was very odd. It was just a ladder I was climbing, but very quickly disillusioned. And I've never looked backwards. I've never ever thought I needed anyone else. I need my God brothers and other devotees association, but other than another guru, everything is there in Prabhupada's books. It was his Bhagavad Gita that changed my life, because I had read so many, from Gandhi to this one, Vivekananda, whoever I could get my hands on, and I just didn't feel anything. There's just nothing there. I read Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, it was one pure realization in every word. And just his kindness. I'll tell you where I felt his greatest kindness when I listened to audio of Prabhupada with that doctor in Bombay on the morning walks. And I'd been with many morning walks there also, whether it be Madras or Bombay. I forgot his name, if it was Patel but all devotees know him because he would ask aggressive, somewhat condescending, irritable questions to Prabhupada. I never saw Prabhupada upset with him once. I sometimes have to turn off my audio of Prabhupada when that man's asking questions, because it just seems so offensive to me. But Prabhupada liked that, because he knew that the whole world was challenging this philosophy, and he was letting us see how to deal with a person. It was almost like Prabhupada was doing the Chinese water torture. Because I met that man after Prabhupada left, and he was crying like a child. So Prabhupada did that. He wore him away, because he never got angry. Just kept answering his questions beautifully. Then he would challenge Prabhupada. But he loved Prabhupada, but we couldn't see it because of his challenging way. But he loved Prabhupada, and Prabhupada didn't mind. And he actually Prabhupada was requesting him to come to Kumbh Mela. And he kept, with me going to Vrindavan, and he kept saying, no, I can't go on this road. He eventually went with Prabhupada, from what I heard, to Kumbh Mela. just the qualities were just amazing. And anytime Prabhupada chastised us, it was 5 seconds of pain and just thousands of hours of ecstasy, because it was like cleansing. And it wasn't often, but I've had the cane raised at me, I think, twice for maybe talking to someone behind him, or that was usually it. I didn't want to say too much on morning walks because of that, and I stayed a little bit behind sometimes, but it was always ecstatic. I never once had a doubt to this day, and I'm just so happy I found Prabhupada. Or he found us. You know, he was looking for us. And just pure mercy of Srila Prabhupada.
One of the things that I really appreciated about being in the presence of Prabhupada was the excitement that Prabhupada brought. Even though Prabhupada never came with a big fanfare and he always kept such a humble profile, the love of the devotees when Prabhupada would come was so exciting and so contagious that even as a new devotee, the time I came in late 74, 75, the movement was so big. There's thousands and thousands of devotees, and everyone was hankering to get, a little bit of nectar from Prabhupada. But Prabhupada was so large and so big in his presence and his love that no one ever felt left out, even though I didn't get to go on a morning walk or have a personal conversation with him. I felt so included. He was so inclusive in his personality and his love that it really just radiated from him. So you felt really satisfied. Even though the devotees were, doing more intimate things with him, just to stay back and, help cook for him or clean his room. You felt such a connection with him that you didn't have to be personally present with him at the time to feel the mercy, to feel the grace that was coming from him. And even though that there was so much fanfare around him, Prabhupada just kept that humble, very meek and very grave demeanor about him. Sometimes people would say, that Prabhupada didn't smile enough, or in his pictures or something, that he was, wasn't like other gurus and things, but that was Prabhupada's grace, really, that he wasn't flashy, that he was always giving the attention to Krishna and away from himself. And in doing that, that endeared us even more to Prabhupada and his wonderful legacy that he left for us and for future generations. And I'm just so grateful that I was able to be a part of that, and am still trying in my small way to push on Krishna consciousness and push on the wonderful qualities and the love that Srila Prabhupada had for all of us and will continue to have into the next generations to come.
Je anilo Premadana Koruna Prachu Je anilo Premadana Koruna Prachu